Hello everyone, this is Jotto and welcome to my tournament recap for the Asperia Cup number 2. Didn't do one for number 1, however, part of that was because we didn't have deck lists. This time we have deck lists. They changed their format, it's now Conquest with deck lists, and I think they're changing it for the next one as well, which from what I can tell is going to be single deck with sideboard. We'll see which one's better. I'm not a big fan of Conquest in Spellweaver. A lot of people will know that I'm not particularly a big fan of Conquest in Hearthstone, but it serves its role there. But anyway, so I'll be going over the top 3, since it was double elimination, and the top 3 is basically the winner and then the 2 people from the loser's bracket finals. In this case we had Kindle, who is one of the Acebreakers players on as far as the Spellweaver team is concerned, won the tournament. Fuzz came second. Fuzz is actually on Hyperion, which is the other Spellweaver team that's roaming around a lot currently. And then in third place we had Pedro. Now, the sort of battle between Kindle and Fuzz was an interesting one because they met in the winner's bracket. Kindle lost in the best of 3. Then he beat Pedro in the loser's bracket and went back up to face Fuzz. Now, because he came from the loser's bracket, he had to beat him in 2 best of 5s. And when he lost to Fuzz, they were close games, but he ended up losing the last game fairly handily, and it was 2-1 in Fuzz's favor. So when it came down to the finals, we were kind of expecting it was going to be a very, very difficult thing for Kindle. And then he 6-0'd. He won 6 games in a row to take the finals. It was a really quite ridiculous final. I did cast the entire thing. It was good fun casting. We had some issues with finding some games, but we got Kindle to screen share, and so I cast his entire tournament run from around quarterfinals forward. So anyway, we're going to quickly go over each deck that these players used. It was best of 3 with Ban and best of 5 in the finals, Conquest. So they all brought 3 different lists. As far as tournament heroes goes in general, Advanced Zash was the most popular, Basic Zash was second most popular, which was kind of funny. We had Elreich making a big breakout. We had some Keanu decks. These were the major ones. Advanced Espina was another major force there. And a couple odd heroes roaming around. There was only one Advanced Neva deck, which was baffling to me because I would have said Advanced Neva. If I'd made a video talking about the decks that I was thinking of running for the tournament, Advanced Neva would be in the top 5. Now, I didn't actually play, but that's because I'm a bit busy currently, so I didn't actually have time to prepare. So, moving past the 3-minute long intro, let's get into Kindle's 3 lists. These are all on mum cards, which are the guys that ran the tournament. I will link this particular page in the description so you can check out these lists yourself. First things first, we had a basic Darius the Prodigy of Wisdom, blue-red deck. Now, blue-red was the most popular color combo in the entire tournament besides mono-red. I think mono-red was more popular, but blue-red was second most popular. Now, this was a very, very aggro version, whereas a lot of the other ones were running things like Phoenixes. If we look at shrine count, if you're running aggro blue-reds, not really many shrines you can run. Altar of Dragons is not very useful for an aggressive deck, and both of the blue shrines suck, for lack of a better term. So, very, very basic shrine count, 12 in red because you want to start with it, 9 in blue because you want it by turn 3. That's basically the split, in case anyone's wondering if you want to start red and get blue on turn 3, or any color split there. If you're running 21 shrines, it's 12 to 9. As far as creatures go, we have 8 1-drops, 4 lizard, 4 goblin for an early start, 3 Fia. 4 is a bit clunky with the legend rule, but Fia is a very, very good card in general. You get snipes on opposing goblins, and you get some extra damage, and it also lets you kill a 4 HP creature with a fireball with that swift and ranged from hand. You can also get energy on it and then fireball them on their turn to get a second energy in your turn cycle and sacrifice it for some extra damage. So very, very versatile card there. 3 Protector. A lot of decks were running 4 Protector, but in this case it's by turn 3. You may not have a blue shrine and you don't really want multiples, you just want one, mostly for the mirror match, but it's a decent card in general. So Protector, very, very nice there, but only as a 3-off. Next we got Gnome Power Engineer. Again, artifact removal from the blue splash. Most of the artifacts, since Helm of Dominion is very popular right now, whereas spells are not quite as popular, so running 2 gnomes and 1 fireworker. This is something which comes up in Kindle's deck building a lot, where Kindle's the kind of person where once he starts perfecting a list, he starts running lots of like 1-ofs and 2-ofs, and it's actually impressive that you can get this entire thing to work. Now, my last video I did on Divine Offerings kind of showed how you can get this to work, and how, especially with later game 1-ofs, you can actually use that. Although in this case, in case of the fireworker, it's a 3 artifact removal split. Now, the Gnome Power Engineer is better artifact removal, but the fireworker is also a functioning 2-drop. So as a result, you run 1 fireworker, 2 gnomes, because you may just need the 4th functioning 2-drop, along with the 3 fiat. That's why it's in the deck. 2 Ramgath, bit low, but then there's also the 3 Dragonfires to complete out the 5 damage train, so to say. So we've got 5 of those total, and with the basic Darius Hero Power, you can draw through most of your deck every game anyway. Now, the reason for this is because there is no reason to go up to 3 levels without finishing the game with a Ramgath or a Dragonfire or over 2 turns. So, you only need 5, because you only need to deal 10 damage out of those 5 cards. Basically, those 5 cards will deal 10 damage between them, roughly, or 8, or something around there. And as a result, you don't need more than 5, whereas the mono-red variant often needs 6 or 7 in some cases. 3 Gibber and Ronnie. Now, this was surprising, although it does make sense a lot. Most of these run 4 Gibber and Ronnie. The reason this is running 3 is because of those protectors. Protector is very, very good, but the point is you may have to go blue on turn 3 into Library Guards, or Gibbo and Ronnie into Library Guards. So the point is, if you go blue on turn 3 for Protector for a good trade, and then you play Library Guards, you never have a chance to play your Gibbo and Ronnie, which means the Gibbo suffers a bit on the numbers in exchange for a bit of extra Protector. It also means you're running your 6 3-drops that can actually be played on curve, with some Gnome Power Engineers in the 3-drop slot as well, but that's more later in the game. 4 Library Guards, pretty much the reason to run blue currently as a splash color, along with, in this case, basic Darius' Hero Power. So the 4 Library Guards, good body, draws cards, gets you through your deck, very, very good card overall. Onto the spells. 4 Fireball, pretty self-explanatory, solid removal. Only 2 Fire Blast. Most of these decks are running 3, however Darius has a bit more draw power, so you can kind of get away with the 2. On top of that, you're running Force Mage to help with the red mirrors. The last 2 cards I want to talk about are Flash Freeze, which was used to get rid of big things. It can also be used with Fia to great effect. It's basically a 1-for-1 because the Fia will kill it without dying. Same goes with Protectors. And it kills goblins and just a lot of 1 HP stuff. Also, along with Fireball, you can kill pretty much anything. The last thing I want to talk about is this Massive Assault. One of Massive Assault. Massive Assault, honestly, was baffling. I thought there were way more than 1, and then he showed the deck on his screen when he was screen sharing, and it was 1. Now, the reason this was baffling was because he drew it in every single game he played with this particular deck. So it's really impressive, but that 1 of Massive Assault. Now, the logic behind this is you want Massive Assault in the deck, but he never wants to draw 2, no matter what. He doesn't mind drawing 0, but he never wants 2, and that's the reason why there's only 1 Massive Assault in the deck, and it's just a solid card. I actually won him a couple games. It was a very, very surprising tech card, and I think it's really quite good. A lot of people don't expect to have to deal with a spell in red, so very, very good tech card in that regard. Then, onto the other 2 decks he was running. If we see a similar card, we'll just kind of move past it very, very quickly. Now, his second deck was Advanced Zash. Advanced Zash was run by almost everyone. Came in 2 forms, Mid-Range, which was a bit faster, and Heavy Control. Those are the 2 Advanced Zash builds that really happen. Now, there was a couple weird hybrid with Rush and things like that, but those are the main 2 things, which was Mid-Range and Control. Now, Kindle was running a Heavy Control deck. Fun fact, by the way, he actually hadn't played a single game with Advanced Zash before the tournament, and it was banned in every single series, so he actually only played 2 games with Advanced Zash in the entire tournament, which was in the finals. And he won 2 games with it. That's just how good Advanced Zash is currently. So, Shrines, running 24 Shrines. That is an excessive amount. However, he is running 4 Altar of Dragons, which, again, I would say is an excessive amount. Honestly, I'm not sure how much it works. However, there is a lot of reason to go up to 4 levels in this deck, even though there's no creature or spell that requires it, mostly just because of Word of Fire. Looters help with getting through the massive amount of lands you'll be drawing, so maybe 24 works. I think, personally, I would run 22. in this kind of deck, and probably 2 Altar of Dragons. You just don't want multiple, but it's a different way of looking at the deck. As far as creatures goes, 4 Goblin Warrior, which is mostly for trading, but lets you get fast openings. 3 Fia, pretty much the same as before, although Fia is a lot more defensive and a lot less offensive in this particular deck. Although, as I said, with Goblin Warrior, you can get those fast openings and punish really, really slow ones, get a bunch of damage in. 2 Fireworker, mostly for Helm of Dominion, but it's also it's basically 5 2-drops you can run, but it helps with getting your Phoenix back from Helm now they can't sacrifice it. 4 Looter, because you need to draw cards to get through the massive amount of shrines you're going to be drawing. Basically, you will never miss a shrine with this deck, but you need looters and word of fires and things so that you're drawing enough actual playable cards to make up for it. As I said, I haven't played a 24 shrine deck, so I actually don't know how that works out. Ramgath, 3 Ramgath, legend rule you don't want 4. Ramgath is mostly used for closing speed in the late game. You want to be using Dragonfires and Ramgath. There's 6 total instead of the 5 we saw in the last deck. 6 of these total, and you want to be using these to deal probably about 20 damage in one game. Or maybe if they have healing, or 15 if they don't. So you need that 6th one. 4 Phoenix. Phoenix is the arguably best creature in the game right now, along with Karthus. And it's astonishingly good. It was probably the 2nd or 3rd most played card in the entire tournament. I think the most played card was Fireball, along with Library Guards. But Phoenix was absolutely astonishing. Zash is kind of the king of Phoenix, which is that he has Phoenixes in a red control deck where it works best with, and he can wipe the board of Phoenixes repeatedly. It is bad against Dominion, that's why you run those Fireworkers. Onto the spells for Fireball, kind of expected. 4 Fire Blast, because you want to run a heavy, heavy control, and with the looters you'll be drawing a lot more, and 4 Fire Blast to clear the board so you can draw more cards with looters. Now, Word of Fire I talked about a little bit earlier, where sometimes you go up to 4 levels. Most of the time you won't need to, because in the super late game for 7 mana you can actually deal 6 damage and draw a card to something with your hero power and also with Word of Fire. But sometimes you go up to 4 red just to deal with things like Karthus. It also allows you to get through Phoenixes in the late game without too much suffering. On to the last card in the deck. Again, another Kindle 1-of. We have the 1-of Burning Rage. Now, this was a card that's basically teched for control decks, because if you get it down before Silencer, you get to draw cards while breaking the Silencer. It also lets you just keep up with the control deck and draw all of your burn to try and beat them at their own game. Now, this is the kind of thing where, against a control deck, if the game isn't ending early, you pretty much have to just make sure you find the Burning Rage and then draw for it as fast as you possibly can. And yeah, that's basically why. Now, we did get him onto the stream to talk a little bit about these decks after the tournament, and the Burning Rage was the kind of thing where it's not too bad if you draw it. So if it's only 1, 2 is bad, but the point is 1 isn't too bad, and it has its matchups where it's really, really good. Onto his last deck, which was the only Advanced Never deck in the entire tournament. 20 Shrine deck, again, complete opposite of the last one. 4 Elven Sanctuary. Now, this deck was largely untested. As I said, we talked to him a bit after the tournament. This deck was largely untested. It definitely wasn't complete. So this is not his current version of the deck, actually. But yeah, Elven Sanctuary is a 4-of, because it's pretty much the only way of getting early game. Only 20 Shrines. Why? Because you draw so many. There's also 3 Nienas in this deck, which allow you to, and I should have been using the Zoom feature for the entire video, but Nienas allow you to look at the top card and get the Divine Offerings at the right time to not lose card advantage. Now that's a big deal because you're running Advanced Never. Now Advanced Never got a massive buff, if I can get that hero power on there. Advanced Never got a massive buff in the last patch, reducing the cost of the hero power to 1 as opposed to 2, which lets you play an extra creature. However, this deck, for lack of a better term, could be called a creature combo deck, because unlike the other Advanced Never decks, which rely on just valuing your opponent to death, this one works more like a combo elf deck in Magic. Basically, it's running 37 creatures and 3 spells. The only spells in the deck are Overwhelming Forces. Which, you think, why is he running Overwhelming Forces? Well, I played a little bit with this deck after the tournament, and you get some ludicrous openings, because the Overwhelming Forces will be hitting 4 or 5 creatures, because the only non-creatures are basically Overwhelming Forces and Shrines, and there's only 20 Shrines and 3 Overwhelming. so there'd only be 2 left in the deck, period. However, you can use Overwhelming Forces to get things like Karthus, which is a 3 of, but the reason this deck works so well and is so explosive is 2 cards, Moon Priestess and Summoner Druid, both 4 ofs, and they both allow you to get ludicrous amounts of worth out of your mana. Summoner Druid reducing things to 0, Moon Priestess with a hero power costing 1 and replacing the mana immediately. And with this boundless amount of mana, you can get huge amounts of creatures on the board and just wipe away your opponent. The last game of the final, the second series of the final, was a win with the Advanced Never deck, where on turn 4 he reverenced and played 9 mana of creatures in 1 turn and drew 4 cards. On turn 4. That's the kind of openings that these decks can actually get, these massive elf combo decks type things, and they get lots of damage in. Now, there aren't that many solid threats, it's basically just Karthus and Haldir Rider, but when it comes down to it, if you have enough elves, it really works. Now, this was obviously bad against red, but for most of the tournament, you can ban red, which is why I think it was a good pick for the tournament, but most people weren't playing Advanced Neva at all. In fact, he was the only Advanced Neva player in the entire tournament. Now, most of these cards are very self-explanatory. They're basically just every good elf he could think of. 3 Temptress, just for hand disruption. 3 Neanix, you need it. Only 2 Sharpshooter. Now, this was apparently just to deal with red, but wasn't actually a very good card in the deck itself. Only 3 Haldiri. A lot of decks were running 4, and as a compensation it was 4 Elf Commander to make all of your elves unblockable, especially Grove Guardian, because Grove Guardian with an Overwhelming Forces or a Neva hero power could get to 6/6 or 7/7 and attack. So that's the entire sort of elf combo-ish deck. Onto the Fuzz. Now, the Fuzz was playing 3 of his own decks in terms of just completely created from scratch. He actually did a video deck tech for each of these, and I will link his YouTube channel in the description and you can go check those out. First things first, we had Hermeleon. Now, this particular deck was running 21 Shrines, 9 Order, 12 Nature total, with 2 Elven Sanctuary, because there's a couple of elves in this deck it can make use of. Creature-wise, we had 4 Elf Scout for some early pressure, along with Elf Warrior as the chosen 2-drop, and then transitioning from there we have 2 Unicorns for things like Helms and just spells in general, and Cavalry Field Captain Sharpshooter to keep adding the pressure. Now, where this deck really comes into its own is Tireless March, Hermeleon's hero power, which allows you to attack twice with Fey of Charm, stealing 2 creatures. The first one gets exhausted after attacking, which means it gets past 2 blockers basically, and Ancient Treant locking down blockers whenever it attacks. The other sort of good combo in this deck itself is Call of Yalaya, which lets you tutor for your 2-drops that you really need, because everything in this deck is a 2-drop apart from Sharpshooter. Treant, Fey of Charm are the 2 important ones, and Unicorn, so you're actually running effectively 6 Unicorns, 8 Treants, things like that, 6 Fey of Charm, so often he would actually get to both Fey of Charm on the board at once. And Instill Life. Now, this is mostly resurrecting Ancient Treant, because you just get swamped by Ancient Treants, but as I said, it can also be used for Fey of Charm to get effectively more than 2 in the deck. As far as the rest of the spells go, just some basic pump. Word of Vigor is a good pump spell that draws you a card, and also the Ambush Strike. Now, this deck always goes up to double green, so Word of Vigor is effectively +2/+2 draw a card over the state of your board. This was a very, very interesting deck. Didn't get to see much of it in the actual tournament, because the only games I saw of Fuzz were in his games against Kindle, where Hermeleon just sort of lost a lot to Advanced Neva because that matchup is really bad. But I think the deck is really cool. Not sure how good it is, but I think the deck is really cool, and I think with some tweaking it could be a very, very potent archetype. I mean, leave it to Fuzz to come up with some strange stuff. The red deck of choice he picked was Burk the Uncontainable. I love this mono red shrine count, 20 red shrines. I love decks where it's just 20 basic shrines. As far as the creature suite goes, we've got 8 1-drops for a solid aggressive deck, 3 Fias as normal, 3 Fireworkers for the 6 2-drops, along with Helm Remover, although there aren't any Phoenixes in this deck, which is a bit surprising, 4 Looters, which works well with Burke's hero power because you can kill things in front of the looter and keep attacking him to draw, 4 Ramgath. This actually came up where he would play 3 in a game and often win with that, so those 4 Ramgath getting massive amounts of damage in, and then 4 Gibber and Ronnie. So fairly standard apart from the 4 Ramgath basically. For a little bit more of a controlling thing, because you don't go full face with Burke. You can use those looters for some draw. As far as the spell count goes, again, very, very staple counts here. 4 Fireball for removal and burn, 4 Word of Fire for a value spell, 3 Fire Blast because you don't need 4 in most decks, and 3 Dragonfire to complete out a 7 5 damage set here. Most of the time you play 6, but in this case he's playing the extra Ramgath for a bit of extra reach, so he's actually playing 7. But besides that, not really much to talk about with that particular deck. Very, very basic rage deck, just running Burke and looters as the tech. Last of Fuzz's decks was Elrike. Now, this was Elrike Red, which was the most popular Elrike deck in the entire tournament. Elrike, of course, copies creatures on the board, and it copies all of their higher stats, so the big dream play in these kinds of decks was Red Dragon making a 5/5 with 3 speed. Now, when we had Kindle on afterwards, he had some rather strong opinions about this and just said that these decks would be better with basic Darius. I'm not sure if that's true, haven't really tested it, but just take that with a grain of salt that he did in fact say that, and he was playing against these decks all day. The Scrolls community was playing Elrike Red a lot as well, and Fuzz did his deck tech on it a couple days before, so it was assumed that he was going to be playing it. So let's go over the deck. 21 Trines, 11 Rage, 10 Blue. The main reason for this is because there are no early drops in this entire deck, which means he just kind of wants a split. 1 extra Rage because you may want to start Rage for a Gibber and Ronnie on turn 3 or 2 with Spark. That, and there's double red requirement but not double blue requirement, so the extra Rage Shrine comes in handy. Creature-wise, 4 Protectors because you have no early game, so you need defensive creatures. 3 Disciple of Zash, which is a bit slow, but is a value engine and lets you deal with 1 HP creatures a lot. 2 Gnome Power Engineer because you're running 4 Phoenixes and you need the Helm Remover. 4 Gibber and Ronnie, again, solid 3-drop. In this case, in the case of Kindle's decks, he was running 3 Gibbo, 3 Protector, and then some earlier game stuff. In this case, he's going full-on 3-drops into Library Guards regardless. So running Gibber and Ronnie is a little bit more in the late game if you keep drawing them. Library Guards, almost one of the MVPs of the entire tournament, so 4 of there, as we talked about earlier. Phoenix, same thing as we talked about with Advanced Zash, just a value creature. You can also copy it as a 3/3 with 3 speed with Elrike's Hero Power, giving you a value engine. Add Red Dragon for the super, super late game with that massive damaging ability. Now, this was actually a lot better in practice than on paper, because it did in fact win a few games. So I really, really like the Red Dragon. Not sure if you need 2 or 1 or what, but the point is that it was a very, very good late game tech. As far as spells goes, there was 3 Flash Freeze. This looks a lot like Kindle's deck basically, but yeah, 3 Flash Freeze. Running Ancient Wisdom because he doesn't have access to basic Darius' Hero Power, he needs the draw. It's a bit sketchy, you need to run 2 Ancient Wisdom, but then you have 4 Word of Fire to make up for the fact that you're not running a 3rd one. So the Word of Fires will draw effectively probably an extra 2 cards in the game, because you'll probably play 2, so it kind of makes up for it. And then 4 Fireball, 3 Fire Blast, standard numbers there. Now, the weakness of this deck was its early game. However, if you could ban the super aggressive deck, it would be able to pretty much just sweep through most other decks. So, different style to what we saw Kindle running. By far, he was running a much earlier and much more aggressive deck with basic Darius, whereas Fuzz was playing Elrike with a bit more late game and very, very little in the early game. So, lastly, we'll be on to Pedral. As I'm going through these fairly quickly now, since I've talked about a lot of the cards already. However, I haven't talked about a deck like this. This is Pedral's Advanced Nepharos deck. As far as Shrine counts goes, he's running at 9 Wisdom, 9 Corruption, and then 2 Sanctum, 2 Thaumic. Perfect split down the middle. Now, the reason for this is because he needs double Corruption at some point for Succubus and Occultism, but then he also needs the double Wisdom for Lamp, Silencer, and the New Horizons helps out with color fixing, so it just works out in general to have a bit of both. As far as the creatures go, we have 4 Protector for Rage, since you really need help against Rage with this kind of deck. 3 Gnome Power Engineers to deal with Helmet Dominion on things like Succubus, and it also deals with opposing lamps and such. 4 Spirits is a lot of discard, but he's also running the 4 Splitting Headaches, the full 8 discard creature and spells. Now, the reason this is not too risky is because you can ban Advanced Despina. Basically, Advanced Despina against a lot of discard, especially against Nepharis. And Nepharis isn't aggressive enough to force the Despina to play cards in the early turns, so you just keep drawing with Shrines, drawing with Shrines, drawing with Shrines, take the Splitting Headaches, and then just play Bloodwell Matriarch and make him discard his entire hand and use the hero power to get the spirits out of the deck, so that Nepharis actually comes off worse. However, if you can ban Despina, it means that one of the worst matchups for the deck is out of the way. Then we have 4 Library Guards, Stable Body and it draws, and 4 Succubus. Now Succubus is really good with Advanced Nepharis because every time it dies you reanimate it. You can't sacrifice and reanimate it anymore, but the point is you can keep attacking with it, and as soon as they block it you just reanimate it, get more damage in, and heal for 1 life. Since you heal for 3 and then lose 2. As far as spells goes, as I said, 4 Splitting Headache, 4 New Horizons. A lot of these decks run 3, however, given how the earliest play is Protector, there's nothing like in Dominion where you have Assassin on turn 2. You can run the 4 New Horizons since you're going to need a reliable 2-drop to ramp you up in the first place. And lastly, 4 Flash Freeze. A lot of Flash Freeze in the top 3 actually in the end. But 4 Flash Freeze functions as the closest thing this deck has to hard removal, basically, when it comes to Corruption and Wisdom. Now, that and Sanctum of the Void, but you need to clear out all the small stuff, and that's what Flash Freeze is for. As far as the artifacts goes, we've got 3 Silencers. Silencer is a very, very powerful card. It was nerfed, however, it's still good, and it still locks your opponent out of the game. Now, this kind of deck can't use it to the same extent as Advanced Despina can, however, Silencer is still a very, very powerful card for any control deck to be running that is running Wisdom. And lastly, 4 Lamps for that really, really powerful punch in the late game, and it's very difficult to deal with for a lot of decks. Now, if they're playing red, you could always ban the red deck, and then that's pretty much the only deck that has a reliable way of getting rid of both Silencer and Lamp, with the onboard Goblin that can sacrifice itself, or with Fireball in the case of Lamp. So anyway, on to Pedrol's other 2 decks. We have a Elric red deck. Now, this particular Elric red deck is a bit different. It's running 10 Wisdom, 10 Rage, 1 Altar, and 1 Thaumic Laboratory, which is an interesting addition. Besides that, though, the deck is very similar to Fuzz's in terms of its approach. However, the execution is different. What I mean is it's still got 4 Protectors, you got your 3 Gnomes for artifact removal because you need it for Phoenix, 4 Ramgath because you want to be a bit more aggressive in this particular version, and the New Horizons is in here to let you ramp into these things. Besides that, we've got still the 4 Phoenixes, 3 Fire Blast, 4 Fireball. These are all standard numbers, as you may have realized at this point. And then 1 Red Dragon. Now, the 1 Red Dragon, 1 Altar is just for the super late game, where he also has Silencers to go up to 4 levels. But the point is that if you don't draw your Silencer, you can always use your Red Dragon and put it into play with the Altar, by accident or deliberately in the case of if you only have 1 card in hand. On top of that, you can keep Divine Offering through your deck to try and get the Red Dragon in those super late games when you're actually going to need it. Now, the approach for finishing the game is a bit different. As I said, 4 Ramgath, we've got the 2 Dragonfire, 6 of the 5 damage dealers. Then we've got 3 Lamps, so we've got effectively an extra 3 of the 5 damage dealers. They deal 4 immediately, but then can deal 8 on the following turn, very difficult to interact with, and then 3 Silencers to help out with the late game. So this is a bit like Fuzz's deck, although a little less consistent in the mid game, but it has the ramp option and a stronger late game. Also, Thaumic Laboratory helps a little bit with the Protectors. And the last deck we're going to go over is actually the only Wisdom Dominion deck in the entire top 3. And this appears to be broken. Yeah, this deck is actually broken, so we're not going to be able to look at this. But anyway, so yeah, he was running Wisdom Dominion. Now, this was, from what we could tell, a control deck, although we only really saw it once, which was in his match against Kindle, and we didn't see enough of the deck to confirm whether it was implants or not. However, it looked to be Wisdom Dominion control with Darius, and it had a slow opening against the Darius deck from Kindle, and so he lost the game with it. But anyway, Thank you all for watching, and if you like the content, please subscribe. If you have any feedback or want to ask me any questions or opinions on the decks shown, put it in the comment section below. The Fuzz's YouTube channel will be in the description if you want to check out his personalized deck techs on his 3 decks. And also, this page I'm reading from will also be in the description so you can check out the decks yourself. But as for now, this is Jotto, signing off.